All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be doing a Rust electricity tutorial. You're welcome. You're welcome in advance. Guys, here's the goal. 20 minutes, or not even 20 minutes, under 15 minutes. Just want to give you some fundamentals. Something so that if you were brand new to this, I know there's a lot of Rust electricity tutorials online right now. Some of them are very good. Some of them may happen to be very convoluted. It's no one's fault, just the nature of the beast. Again, the goal with this is under 15 minutes, give you a really good general basic foundational understanding of how this stuff works. And I think the best way to do that would be to just understand these two things: how to harness electricity from multiple sources, and then how to delegate that said harnessed electricity towards specific goals and tasks and things that are specific to your needs regarding your base design, yada yada. So let's go ahead and just dive right into this. The component that you're going to be using in Rust to harness electricity from multiple sources would be the root combiner. Very simple component to understand. It has two inputs, as you can see, input 1, input 2. It'll combine those two inputs to give you one pure combined power out. All I mean by that is if you have 100 coming in, 100 is going out. As you can see live and in-game, it'll update there. If I plug in a small battery, which outputs 15, it'll combine the 100 from the large battery, the 15 from the small, to give you a total combined output of 115. Making sense so far. Outstanding. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect that. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to plug in this small generator here. And you'll see we're at 100 watts. As soon as I turn it on, we're injecting 40 Rust watts into the system. Turn it off and you see it update live. I'll go ahead and disconnect that again, and for just more demonstrational purposes here, I'm going to go ahead and connect a solar panel, which happens to be outputting 20 watts. The 100 plus the 20 from the solar panel gives you 120. Thank you. Sorry, cats. So as you guys can see, root combiner has two inputs. It'll combine those two inputs to give you one pure combined output. So if you guys understand that, then this right here is just a real-world in-game example of how you would utilize multiple root combiners to connect, or I should say harness power from multiple sources, connect them all together to give you one pure combined total power output. What we have here is 6 solar panels. Each one is outputting 20 watts each. Now, we happen to be on a build server. As you guys know, in-game, it won't necessarily be like that, but for demonstrational purposes, it gives us a nice clean example here. Each solar panel is connected to an input of a root combiner, and then what we're doing is we're connecting all the root combiners together to get one pure combined total power output. So this 40 here and this 40 here give us 80, and that 80 combined with this 40 from here, as you guys can see, gives us a total of 120 in this example, which we're now going to utilize for delegation as we transition to the second part of this tutorial here. So harnessing electricity from multiple sources, the root combiner would be the component that you're going to use to do that. 2 inputs, 1 output, and you would utilize as many as you need depending on how many sources you have. Each one of these solar panels could potentially represent any source. It could be a wind turbine, it could be a power generator, whatever it may happen to be. You're going to plug your source into an input and then combine them all together to get one pure combined power out. So if you guys are with me on that, let's go ahead and transition to delegation. And the two components you're going to be using potentially to delegate electricity within Rust is going to be either the electrical branch or the splitter. They are a little bit different, so I'm going to go over both of them and just the differences in the behavior and when you might choose one over another. So we have our 120 watts going into this branch here. I just want to point out here that the branch is literally the inverse opposite of a root combiner in the sense that the root combiner has 2 inputs, 1 output. The branch has 1 input, 2 outputs. The root combiner is designed to combine the 2 inputs to give you one pure output, as to where the branch is designed to take 1 input and split it into 2 outputs. And the way it does that is rather unique, and this is where things could tend to get a little bit confusing. There's a left and a right side to each branch output. The left side will always have a default value of 2. It's important to understand and remember that. The right side will be whatever the remainder happens to be. So that's easy to remember, right side remainder, which is typically daisy chained to the next branch for further delegation. But before we go ahead and do that, just going to take a look again at this example. We have 120 going in, left side default value of 2. That gives us a remainder of 118. Now it's important to know that the left side is also a value that you could potentially set. It has a default value of 2, but you can set it to whatever your need may happen to be. I'm going to go ahead and interact with this. I'm actually going to set it to a lesser value of 1 because only 1 rust watt is required here for this small light, and that should be sufficient, and there you have it. So in that example, 119 would be the remainder, and that would be daisy chained to the next branch for further delegation. I'm going to go ahead and set this to a value of 10. So I want to power up this boombox here, which I happen to know requires 10 rust watts. So if I go ahead and plug it in there, you'll see the option to play. Bad timing because I guess the track was skipping, but as you guys will shortly see, something should be playing shortly, right? Okay. Well, there you have it. Of course, during my demonstration here, it had to get fucked up. But as you guys can see, when you have sufficient wattage, you have the ability to play it, and you have the ability to stop it. If that wattage was insufficient, let's say if it were set to 7, you wouldn't even have that display there. So, terrible example there, but of course that's just my luck. And with the 109 that we have left over, we're going to daisy chain that to the input of the next branch for further delegation. Again, left side default value of 2, right side in this case a remainder of 107. I'm going to go ahead and set this to a value of 10 because I want to power up a turret. I happen to know that that requires 10 rust watts, so I'll go ahead now and run a line to our turret, which I happen to be unauthorized on. So just for the sake of getting rid of the noise, we'll go ahead and unplug all that, but we'll still leave this and designate that 10 for the turret. And so I think you guys get the understanding now. We have 99 now remaining. I'm going to go ahead and daisy chain that to the next branch for further delegation. And hopefully this will demonstrate for you guys how you're going to use branches to delegate power towards specific tasks and goals that you may have. Now, on a side note here, I also just want to talk about pass-throughs. In this first example, we have 1 going to the light. That's all fine, well, and good. But I just want to point out that we could pass electricity through the light, potentially, if we wanted to another component, like a secondary light, let's say here, for example. The secondary light required 2 rust watts, so I would need a total of 3 to have enough sufficient wattage for both of them to operate. So I'll go ahead and set that to 3, and as you can see, you have exactly that. The reason why that may be important is because, see, back in the day, components actually required wattage in order to operate. That's no longer the case. So you could minimize branches and stuff, and minimize components in general by utilizing pass-throughs. And you can still, to this day, do the same thing and just have less branches and less components and whatnot if you utilize pass-throughs. So I just wanted to make that point. And I can even further the demonstration by saying, hey, this light has a pass-through as well. We can pass electricity through this component as well to another component, and we can continue to stack it like that. So we happen to have a sign here with a little hint if you guys happen to be getting some kind of value out of this. I'm going to go ahead and, well, I happen to know that this sign requires 6 rust watts in order to operate, so if I add 6 to the 3 that we have here, that would make a total of 9. I'll go ahead and set that to 9, and there you have it. Now, with the time that we have left, I'm going to just disconnect this. I'll set this back to 3 to make you guys get the example there. With the time that we have left, I just want to talk about the splitter very briefly. So, again, we have 10 designated here for the turret. The 97 that's remaining is going into this branch. And I'm going to designate 30 of that to demonstrate the splitter. 30 is a nice round number. It's divisible by 2, it's divisible by 3, and by 10. So it's good just to showcase what a splitter can do here. And so just a side note as well, the input is on top with the splitter, output's on the bottom. With the other 2 components we've been working with, the inputs have been on the bottom, the outputs have been on top. So that's not necessarily uniform, so just be aware of that. Whatever component you may be using, just be aware of where its inputs and where its outputs are. That being said, we have 30 rust watts going into our splitter. We have 3 outputs, and it's distributing power evenly whenever it can. If I were to disconnect, of course, you could always use 2 outputs. If you only needed to split the power in half, that's perfectly fine. And of course, if you only wanted to utilize 1, you could do that as well. Now, I just want to point out here that in terms of behavior, the way the splitter behaves, if I were to change this value, let's say to 29 as opposed to 30, notice how the splitter will prioritize outputs 1 and 2 over output 3. If I were to change the value here to 28, let's say, notice how the splitter prioritizes output 1 over 2, which is prioritized over 3. So it always prioritizes output 1 over 2 and 2 over 3. That's just the way it behaves. In the past, the splitter would actually sacrifice wattage in order to distribute power evenly. That's no longer the case. Now it'll utilize the totality of the power that you put into it, and it'll prioritize in the manner in which we just explained. 1 over 2 and 1 and 2 over 3. Now, when would you use a splitter over a branch? Very simple. Anytime you wanted to split power either in half or in thirds, you would use a branch. So there's no right or wrong. Excuse me, you'd use a splitter for that. So there's no right or wrong there. Anytime you wanted to delegate a small amount of energy or a specific amount of wattage to a specific task, you would use a branch. So again, no right or wrong. It just depends on what your needs are. In this case, maybe you have 3 external turrets and you want to run power to all 3 of them. You might set up a splitter, have 30 going to a splitter. Each power out is 10. You run your 3 turrets, and this way you don't have to have 3 branches or whatever for that particular setup. That's just an example. But anytime you want to split power in half or in thirds, you'd use a splitter. Anytime you want to delegate a small amount of power to a specific task, you would use a branch. And that, my friends, is basically harnessing and delegation regarding electricity in Rust, and hopefully that'll at least get you guys off to the races if you're brand new to this, because if you were new and you didn't have at least that information under your belt like that, yeah, it's just wacky to get started. So in the next video, we're going to be talking about Rabbit's infinite power system. If you guys are aware of this, or as you experiment with Rust electricity, you're probably going to see the need for a system that automatically utilizes and replenishes power when needed. So I've been using Rabbit's system for several years now. It's been holding up very well. I did add my little 2 cents here in the form of a root combiner, but we could always get to that when we get to that. But that'll be in the next video. So if you guys want to see something like that, definitely worth checking out. And yeah, I think that's it for now. We're going to go ahead and let the band go ahead and play us out here. And again, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time right here on Aging Rust Addict. Later.